keep my short. Good. Oh, it's recorded. Cool. And
Sorry.
no worries. And then this is the results of the online survey. So 19% of Harmony students and 15% of Oregon City students rode a shuttle at least once per week. And the main thing that would encourage students to ride more is if the shuttle stops were closer to their home or work, which, as the next two maps show, people live everywhere with the students. So it's pretty hard to locate shuttle stops near where they live. This map here shows quarter-mile cells of all students where their home addresses are. And then the transit time shows how far people can get within 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and 60 minutes. And the reason why I'm showing this map is because with the Oregon City shuttle, there's the new one, there's a lot of red here, which is 11 to 15 students in each of these cells. And then the darker purple here, where my cursor is, are more than 15 students in each of those cells. So this area, there's currently no TriMet service. And so I'm really excited to see when the new shuttle comes in that these students should be served by that. So I just wanted to show that area. And then for students going to the Harmony campus in Milwaukee, there's still Oregon City students who go there, or Oregon City people who live in Oregon City. For example, this cell here has 11 to 15 students who go to the Harmony campus from Oregon City. So these students could transfer from the Oregon City last mile shuttle to my shuttle to get to Harmony. So that's some of the things I'm thinking about with the new shuttle. This is a student story that got from a Harmony student, and she feels more comfortable riding the shuttle over the bus, partly because of, she knows people who ride it, and so I just want to share one of the stories about people why they ride the shuttle. This is one of the ideas, recommendations for the plan. Currently, the shuttle goes on a loop, and I don't know if you can see there you go. The right side here, the new proposal is looking at having the shuttle stop at Clackamas Town Center in both directions. So currently, students can only go from Harmony to Clackamas Town Center. In the future, they can go both ways. And the same thing with Clackamas Town Center to Oregon City. It'll provide faster service, so they don't have to stop at Harmony before they go to Clackamas Town Center. And the same thing going to Oregon City. So that should improve service at Oregon City campus from Clackamas Town Center. And I wanted to just share this stat here that 84% of fall 2019 riders started or ended trips at Clackamas Town Center. So that's the most common stop along the shuttle route.
So Ray, are
Yep.
there people other than students that utilize this, and are they
Yes.
included?
Yes, the shuttle is open to the public. When I did a shuttle survey last fall, I think there's about 80% of people who participated in the shuttle survey were students. So about 20% of them were non-students. Yes. So there are non-students who do ride a shuttle.
Is the shuttle currently free, or is there?
It is free. Well, I put free in quotations because student fees pay for about 70% of the cost.
Okay.
So students are paying for it somehow.
Okay.
And before I show the next slide, I just wanted to explain what I mean by bike share and scooter share. The idea that I'm trying to plan for is station-based. So it'll be organized so there won't be parking issues. So everything will be in a station. And the reason why I'm looking at bike share and scooter share, well, before I mention that, from the survey results, about 32% of Oregon City students wanted bike share, and about 36% wanted scooter share. So not too high. I think in Portland they said similar surveys showed about 60 or 70%. So it was much higher in Portland, but it is the suburbs. And the main reason why students don't want bike share or scooter share is because they're satisfied with the current commute and they don't want to bike in the rain or bad weather. Before I show the next slide, I wanted to share that a national, it's called NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials. They did a study and found that average bike share and scooter share trip is 1.2 miles. So using that as a reference point for this map here, the distance here, according to, it's about half mile from here to these neighborhoods. So it's within that 1.2 mile average distance. So pretty much all these neighborhoods within near campus, the Oregon City campus, are within the average bike share scooter share distance, and currently they do not have access to bikes or scooters. So that's one thing that I'm trying to explore over the next, I don't know, 5 years or a few years from now, looking at providing a pilot bike share scooter share in these areas. And if you're wondering what these cells are, these are student addresses or student where students live in these cells. And then the reason why I'm showing this map is because I used the survey results and pinpointed where people, what mode they're using. So these blue circles you see are car drivers, and there's about 8 car drivers within a mile of the Oregon City campus. So currently they're driving a mile to the campus. And so I'm seeing those are pretty good potential for either using the shuttle service or bike share or scooter share, because it's pretty short distance that they're going. And then this is, I think, the last slide I have. There's a lot of different shuttles going on, being planned. I think 2 of them are already funded for operations. The Clackamas Industrial Shuttle and the Oregon City Last Mile Shuttle, and then the Milwaukee Industrial Shuttle and the Tualatin Westland Oregon City Shuttle are only planning funds. But I just want to show this map to show all the exciting planning going on to provide more shuttle service in our areas. And do you have any questions or comments or concerns?
I get a quick one, Mike. So I think someplace in some of these studies they talked about who ultimately will be responsible, TriMet or the counties or the cities. What are you looking at here based on focusing on the Oregon City campus?
Yeah. So for my show specifically, that is managed by the college. We do have funding from state funding, but it's internally managed. And regarding bike share, scooter share, that would probably be a partnership with the city and the county. It probably wouldn't just be the college doing that. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
All right. Well, thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the information.
Yeah, welcome.
And now we will move on to Dana Webb, this city's engineer, which I think you all know. And anyway, transit update will be the first item that she is going to go through. Take it away.
Okay, let's see if I can. Okay, are you guys seeing the PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I do some screen wrangling so I can get to my speaker notes. Okay, so first topic is transit update. And so during the transit update, I'm going to do an update on Clackamas County's transit development plan. 3 of the shuttles that kind of Ray mentioned just a minute ago, the TriMet pedestrian plan work, and then work we're doing with TriMet to look at express and limited bus study in the Portland metro region. Hopefully with the opportunity to implement a little bit more of an express or limited bus stop that serves Oregon City. So these are pretty high level overviews. If you've got questions, please let me know. The Clackamas County Transit Development Plan is moving forward. So they are looking to give a better overview of planning transit service to connect people to jobs, education, healthcare, social services, shopping, recreation, and more. There are 7 transit providers within Clackamas County. So understanding each of their service areas and how they connect into each other is an important piece to make sure that we're kind of covering all the areas with the frequency that we should be. And then kind of this overall question of why do we need a plan? So these plans ensure long-term investments in infrastructure. And as we recently saw with the 2017 Keep Oregon Moving Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, it created a new funding source for these transit services. So doing this upfront planning work is really helpful in those kind of situations. So kind of this big picture overall plan. So I sit on the county's technical advisory committee for this work and kind of provide that Oregon City perspective. They're hoping to have their plan done by early 2021. So this
Dana?
next slide.
Hey, Dana, a comment on that one.
Yes.
It's, as my memory serves, Bob LaSalle has brought up on many occasions getting a service to Meridian Park Hospital. Would that be included in this?
So that's one of the discussion topics that goes with the Oregon City West Linn Tualatin Shuttle.
Okay, thank you.
So this is kind of a big picture overview of the 7 transit providers in Clackamas County and kind of their service, either boundaries or their routes. So the community college and the Mount Hood Express are more of a line type of route, and then the other providers. So, I mean, we've got coverage, but when you look at the county and you look at sort of those more urban areas, we definitely, you know, have some areas missing, and we don't probably have as much connectivity between those service providers. All right. So that's really kind of the quick update on the county's plan. And then kind of just a little bit of information about the shuttles that Ray mentioned. Again, that Keep Oregon Moving funding provided funding for 4 new transit shuttles in Clackamas County. The Oregon City Connector Shuttle, or First Mile, Last Mile Shuttle, was awarded funding for planning and implementation. So not only to identify, you know, service area, but also to start an actual transit service. The Clackamas industrial area also has funding for planning and implementation. And then that Oregon City, West Linn, and Tualatin commuter shuttle, as well as the Milwaukee connector shuttle, are just really feasibility and planning work, so that they would be ready to apply under any future transit funding. So we're currently working on the service models. Hopefully each of you took the transit survey that the county sent out. And so really that's kind of underway, because the Oregon City Shuttle has a goal to be up and running in fall of 2020, which is quickly approaching. The goal was to get the survey results for that sooner and be able to kind of start going through those. So right now, the questions that were part of the survey and the questions that the project team needs to answer is, should those shuttles be run by either the county or cities, or should they be contracted out? Should the services supplement existing services, or to some extent replace some of the TriMet services, because they might be able to provide a little bit better service frequency or reliability? And so those TriMet service could be readjusted and maybe those bigger connections. So that's one of the questions. And then, should the services extend more than 3/4 of a mile beyond TriMet's existing service area and or operate at times when TriMet does not? So I think a little bit of that is timing of, classes that it might be providing service to the college, and those kind of things. So one thing I didn't mention, so these grants that were awarded, because Oregon City is not a transit agency, the grant was actually awarded to Clackamas County, and they are the lead team working on this project. And we've agreed that the four shuttles that we're working on are all being kind of grouped together. And so there's staff from each of the agencies, but it's really led by Clackamas County and their transit group. So their group that runs the Express is leading this. They probably have a little more transit and shuttle experience than city staff. And so they're kind of taking that lead. So some of the work that we've been working on, we haven't seen feedback from the survey yet, but we've kind of taken those key destinations in Oregon City that we think should be served. And kind of the two that obviously pop up are connection at the transit center in downtown Oregon City, and then a connection at the college. And I think there's still a lot of decisions to be made. Is it a fixed route? Is it more on demand? And I think that's really what those survey questions were kind of trying to get out of the community. We had a great public outreach plan of tabling it at events and public houses and all of that, and impacted by the COVID stuff. So, trying this survey method out, and we'll see what we get from that. So the next slide just kind of shows kind of general, the Oregon area and kind of these other areas of interest. So this is the map that the county has developed. So the map shows the 2 park and rides with the idea that one's at the college, and then we've got another park and ride kind of by the, I think it's a church parking lot at the 5 road intersection where the roundabout would go. So a little bit about the Oregon City West Linn Tualatin Commuter Shuttle. They've started talking with the cities, and one of those ideas is tying it to Meridian Park so that people can get, from Oregon City to Meridian Park Hospital. And so I suspect that when we start looking at those key destinations along the corridor, that's one of them that is likely to rise to the top. There's questions about, should it just be, primary stops in Oregon City, West Linn, and Tualatin? Should it have, intermittent stops? The more stops you put in, the longer it takes to get from A to B. And so that's what the survey is hopefully going to help us with. Are people willing to ride it if there's, 8 stops between Oregon City and Tualatin? And what would make a stop that would be considered acceptable from a delay in rider time to get from, A to B? So again, looking at that service model and how we run it, I think ideally it would be nice to run all of these in a similar fashion, either contracted out, which I think is what GroveLink does. So they advertise for a consultant or a service to run a shuttle. And so kind of working through that model. So that's kind of the update. Here's kind of this visual of starting to pull some of these park and rides.
Dana?
Yes.
I have a question about it. So looking at the service model section, pending or planning most considers these fundamental issues and has the 3, like should the county or the cities run the shuttle service? When will those questions come back to advisory groups like us? And would that happen for just us for the model 1 for the connecting of the community college here or the 3 cities? How is that going to play out in terms of what our role might be in the future?
So ideally you've submitted the survey results, but what we can do is look at having a project team bring it back in a little more detail, and kind of work through that with you guys if you guys feel like that's something you want to have participation in.
I've got a question. So it looks like this shuttle is aimed at students and not the general public. And since the destination, and there's very few stops in between the transit center and the CCC, I'm surprised that it doesn't stop at Safeway, it doesn't stop at Fred Meyer. I mean, the bulk of the transit is going to, well, it would seem that it would be to those retail centers where there's lots of people going in and out.
So for route planning, beyond kind of identifying the key destinations, and we've got a list of the top 10 employers in Oregon City, the route planning work hasn't really moved forward. I think what the team is looking for is feedback from that survey on, should this be a fixed route? And then we have to identify a specific fixed route, or should it be a little more on demand? So I haven't used the Oregon City Pioneer Center shuttle, but my understanding is it's a little bit more of an on demand. You call and you ask for them to come and pick you up and to take you to a certain spot. And so that model works, well in that situation. And I think what the team is really trying to find out is that how we would like the first mile, last mile shuttle to work, or would we rather have a fixed route and times like a TriMet route?
So that gets back to who is your target market.
And really it's a first mile, last mile shuttle. So it's getting people to jobs, or to, if the shuttle can help them get to a doctor's appointment. I think where maybe Ray was getting at is, his shuttle, I think, is more of a fixed route, and it doesn't drive around Oregon City and pick up students. But if this Oregon City first mile, last mile shuttle was going to have a route and routed through those neighborhoods where he sees high concentrations of students, and then it ended at the college, those students could use it to get to education.
That is correct.
So I think we're really still in a pretty point where we're trying to figure out the best way to run this. And again, most of us are not shuttle operators. I mean, we want it to be successful, so we want to be able to provide a shuttle that is what the community needs and wants.
Has there been any thought about starting a service from point A to point B and then adding additional stuff as people start using it?
Yeah, and I think the team is really looking at kind of all these options. There's a little bit of a question of, will there be the ridership in the fall with COVID? Later on, I'll show you a TriMet ridership slide that it's pretty impactful. So would, especially, in this time, would more of an on-demand route provide a better service? And so there's still a lot of unknowns, and it sounds like maybe this group is interested in a little bit more of the planning and some of those things, and so it might make sense to have the county's transit team come back and have a little more of an in-depth discussion about it. Today we've got a lot of topics, so I took high-level updates. We've got many months of updates.
How much does it cost to ride? How much will it cost to ride?
I do not know that, but the grant funding provides the money to buy not only the shuttles, but to run the shuttles.
So it could be free.
That's one of those questions in the survey, you know. I mean, the funding would run the program. It's just there's some limitations. You know, if you charged $1 or $2 for a ride, you could provide, you know, a slightly different service.
Dana, John Anderson, help me, I'm older, so is the shuttle envisioned to be something like what we used to call a dial-a-ride?
I think so. If we go with an on-demand model, it would be like that. Visually, the shuttle would be similar in like size as a shuttle, and it would have ability to hold 2 bicycles.
I've seen the Pioneer shuttle quite often.
Yeah, similar to that.
I'll say regarding the payment part, I'm hoping that they'll allow card usage, like TriMet card, because if you use it often enough, then you can get monthly passes, annual passes, and it's cheaper than paying every time you ride it. So I'm hoping they have options for people who ride regularly that would be cheaper to, like, you know, $100 per month kind of thing. So let's throw that out there.
All right, so this,
One more quick question here, and that is, you talk about there being a presentation to the county commission August 5th. Is that a work session or a regular meeting?
the presentation on August 5th there's one to the city commission on ODOT's tolling program.
Which program?
ODOT's tolling program is
Oh,
August.
yeah, okay. Okay, and I'm jumping around here. So if we wanted to listen to that, is there a way for us to get our access through the Zoom so we can just kind of listen to the presentation?
Yes. I'd have to look if the actual Zoom link for that's posted on the city's webpage or if you have to reach out to Katie Riggs.
Yeah, you can get links to the commission meetings from Katie.
Thank you.
All right, so does it sound like the TAC might want to have a little more of a detailed discussion about the Oregon City Shuttle with the project team? I'm seeing some thumbs up.
Yes, for me.
I'm saying that it would be a good thing to have because probably get better information and a little more might be developed by the time they get to us.
Okay, I will see if they can make it to the August meeting if we're ready for that. Because the September one might be getting too close to implementation if they're still feeling confident on their schedule. All right.
All right, so are we ready to move on to the next item on the agenda?
Yes, so I'm on transit, TriMet pedestrian plan, which is I think my last one under transit.
No.
I think I have 2 more.
I'll stop.
TriMet pedestrian plan. So I've been working with TriMet on their technical advisory committee on their update to their pedestrian plan. So they're looking to kind of take a more region-wide look at pedestrian access to transit. So using new data and methods. So in 2011, they focused on just 10 key areas. Back then, GIS data and sidewalk data was a little harder to come by region-wide. So they focused on 10 areas. Back then, they looked at the red soil area and along the Malala corridor. So that work was key in identifying the need for the mid-block pedestrian crossing between Beaver Creek Road and Claremont Way. Their bus staff was identifying concerns with pedestrian safety. And so that 2011 plan identified that need. This new plan has really taken a much wider approach. and provided framework for agencies and cities to identify pedestrian priorities kind of through a transit, which in this case, they focused on equity, safety, and demand. So this here is a screenshot of the kind of, all of these colored lines are project identified in either a city transportation plan or in a regional transportation plan. And they took all of those kind of equity lenses and prioritizations and applied them to the projects. And so you can see here the projects identified in the darkest kind of purplish color. You know, it gives the city that these are the transit projects that are going to best serve your community. So the 9090 shared use path along the Willamette River is one of those dark purple lines. We also see darker purple lines along Clackamas Drive and along 99 here towards Dunes Drive. We see, I need to look into this one a little more because this is the 213 and Beaver Creek intersection, and it shows pedestrian connection along 213. And so I do think there is a regional trail that is supposed to go back here, but I think it kind of warrants looking into it a little bit more. We've got some connections shown down by the college and along 213. And then we've got this connection path that goes from Beaver Creek through the commercial areas to Malala and then extends down to Daphne Lane Elementary. So those are a few of the higher priority projects that this kind of transit review looked at. So kind of from a staff perspective, you know, these are helpful for me when I'm looking at grant applications. And so we did recently get grant funding for some preliminary design work. How do we get a sidewalk along 99E adjacent to the river? So I had already applied for that one before this, but had I not, you know, this really provides that this is a high priority access to transit project. And so these kind of things are extremely helpful when we're pulling together grant applications, as well as prioritizing how do we spend our city dollars. Okay, I think this is my last transit topic. TriMet is working on creating some guidance for express and limited bus stop studies. So the goal is to assess the market demand for these kinds of services and a viable model in the TriMet service area. I think TriMet has a few of these, and I think we may have even actually had one in Oregon City prior to the line opening. But I think with some rerouting after the orange line opened, it's really no longer functions as that. So I've been participating in their technical advisory committee and providing input and insight for Oregon City as well as kind of the surrounding region. They're really looking to the technical group to provide recommendations on routes, services, and an operating model that would work for Express Bus, which is route commuter service with a limited number of stops. It's really a point-to-point service with specific endpoints, and it's typically a service. So in the morning, it would be Oregon City to downtown, and in the afternoon, it would be a downtown back. So those park and ride facilities are critical for an express bus service because people are usually still, you know, riding into that park and ride. In Oregon City, it may be an option to ride the new first mile, last mile shuttle to that express bus, you know, location where they can hop on. And so they're really looking at that. So a limited stop bus service is a fixed route that does not serve every stop for all or part of the day. So it might skip 3 or 4 stops and kind of look at it in that way to speed up the route for a shorter travel time. With transit, you've got kind of two groups of riders. You've got those that are dependent on transit and don't have another option. And then you have those that have a choice, you know, and the choice someone who has a car is what's that time savings for me, or that, you know, cost savings for parking at the other end. And so it's kind of looking at both of those models and making sure that you're enticing enough of those choice riders to ride the service, but also providing a better service to those non-choice riders. So right now we've had, I think, 2 of those technical advisory committee meetings, and we're currently, for our 3rd meeting, we'll be focusing on kind of those areas where we think an express or limited bus stop service would be successful.
Now, is this referring to 99 route, or is this a new route they're referring to?
They haven't really talked about that. It's really more, you know, they've gone out and done a bunch of research on express and limited stop services outside of the Portland metro region. And so they're really hoping to kind of adopt their own set. You know, part of the reason they reached out to Oregon City specifically is I think they do believe that we could support a service like that. And so, you know, they specifically reached out and asked for us to sit on the committee.
Route 99 is really limited stop now.
It is.
And because it used to be express, but when the Max hit down in Milwaukee, they changed it. And it took a lot of harassment on our transportation part to keep them from stopping it altogether. So they are really running it as a limited stop on the west side of the river and a sort of a semi-express on our side.
Yeah, so I'm kind of hopeful that in the next, you know, few months we'll start to see more and see what they think might make sense for service in Oregon City that might provide that quicker connection to downtown, or, you know, even to the end of the Orange Line, possibly.
Now, out of curiosity, is this study related at all to the moving 2020 bond measure with the McLaughlin corridor?
I can't say for sure.
Okay.
At this point, so many transportation things are going on. We'll start to do this.
Yep.
So, I mean, I suspect that, you know, this is TriMet wanting to kind of create this service model that they could then implement in corridors.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Could this TriMet Express route and the West Linn, Tualatin, Oregon City shuttle route kind of be combined? That would make a reasonable express route. Right now, the answer I always get from TriMet is, well, they'd be providing service outside of their boundary, but if their pickup point is inside the boundary and their departure point is inside the boundary, or their delivery point, I mean, is inside the boundary, and they don't make any stops outside, what does it matter?
Yeah, and I think a little bit of that is that service model. Is it one point in Oregon City, one in West Linn, and one in Tualatin, and they could get there reasonably quick? The other kind of, I don't actually have a slide on it, but the other topic that is being discussed quite a bit around the region is the idea of bus on shoulder on I-205. So either a TriMet, you know, express or limited bus route, or the Oregon City Linn shuttle would operate much more efficiently as a bus on shoulder along the I-205 corridor than it would if it had to be in the travel lanes. And so this is, again, all of these different things are separate groups and such, but many of us are all in the same committees.
Mhm.
I'm glad it's you and not me.
It's a lot of committees.
Yes, it is.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's good things that will come out of this work that'll tie to shuttle work, that'll tie to
Mhm.
transit options along the I-205 corridor in the event of tolling, which is our next topic. And so I think all these things are really playing off of each other and are working ideally together. So so I'm going to give a pretty short update on tolling. Tolling has many aspects. It has political aspects. It has technical aspects. I participate on behalf of the city on the technical aspects. So the tolling is something that the Oregon legislature passed in that House Bill 2017, Keep Oregon Moving. It funded some shuttles. It also directed ODOT and the Oregon Transportation Commission to pursue and implement tolling on I-5 and I-205 in the Portland metro region to manage traffic congestion. And I think the only option not to do it is if FHWA said no. And so ODOT's pulled together a tolling team. It's a large team. They have managers, they have technical staff, they've got a technical team, they've got public outreach, and they are working hard on many aspects of it. The preliminary work that they did in 2018 included technical work and some early public outreach, and it determined that tolling could help manage congestion and raise an adequate amount of revenue to fund the improvements needed. So that was kind of that baseline work. If we do tolling, is it a reasonable toll that we could afford the improvements that we would want? And so that first answer was yes. The kind of the steps that they moved into then were the tolling would not be, so there's tolling, there's congestion pricing, there's this fancy term called cordons, where you kind of draw an outline around on a map and everything in there is tolled. So ODOT's work is really moving forward with tolling all lanes of I-205. They looked at an option that only tolls the new lane as a priced lane. So if you want to bypass the congestion in the 2 lanes that are out there, you can hop in that new 3rd lane and pay. And it doesn't provide the congestion relief benefits. That one was pretty early on ruled out. So all lanes of I-205 would be tolled. So that's kind of that first step of the work. From there, they moved into creating technical advisory groups. So they have a regional modeling working group. And so that group is charged with input on modeling tools to be used, performance measures and modeling assumptions, as well as the discussions around the limitations of our modeling software and options. And then they also created a transit and multimodal working group. And so that group is kind of looking at how do we provide transit service on a old roadway so that low income and other folks have an opportunity to still get to work. And then also looking at walking and biking options. And so I sit on both of these working groups, and then Ray also sits on the transit and multimodal working group for his transit work with the college. So these groups, I'm kind of going off memory. Ray might remember differently, but I think they're meeting for like the next 2 years or so, anywhere between maybe 9 to 12 meetings for each of the groups.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, the regional modeling group, I think, has been meeting about every 6 to 8 weeks right now, because we are working through the alternatives analysis. So kind of right now they've done baseline modeling of the roadway system in 2027. And then they've identified 5 alternatives for how they could toll the corridor. And I didn't create slides for these. I can kind of walk you through, sorry, my notes on the floor, the 5 options. So one option is a toll only on the Abernathy Bridge. So if you kind of think about that, there's easy diversion or detour routing around that toll to the Arch Bridge. And so their modeling results show a dramatic increase, very dramatic increase in the volume of traffic that would divert onto the Arch Bridge. So that option is the least preferred option from a traffic volume in Oregon City perspective. They have looked at an option with where they would still toll only the Abernathy Bridge, but they would install 3 tolling gantries. And so today, when tolling is implemented, it's all electronic. And so they would have 3 points along the roadway that would read your automatic reader that you have in your car for tolling. And if you, so by doing this, they could place these such that they could see if you hit that first one, hopped off at 99E, cut across the Arch Bridge and hopped back on, and they could still charge you. So it's an opportunity to try and divert traffic. So that one isn't quite as bad because they can still get you for tolling if you hit 2 of the 3 gantries, but it's definitely still not a preferred option. Option 3 is to toll the Abernathy Bridge and also what they refer to as the Tualatin River Bridge, which is located between 10th Street and Stafford. And so in that option, if you hit both tolls, you would pay half the toll at one bridge and half the toll. And so you'd see a little bit less diversion using the Arch Bridge because you would still likely hop back on and catch that second one. In that case, you could divert all the way around that down Willamette Falls Drive and hop on 205 at the Stafford exit. And so each of these options has different impacts to Oregon City, to Gladstone, to West Linn, but also surprisingly to Canby, because we're seeing in the modeling a lot of diversion that's going to take 99 down to Canby. If their ultimate goal is really south of the Portland metro area, that's the free route to take 99E through Oregon City and then down into Canby. Another option looked at putting 5 different locations along the 205 corridor where you would pay a toll, because then you see a little less of that diversion, because each of the toll gantries that you pass through is a smaller amount, and so people are less likely to divert around. And then another option they looked at was essentially putting toll gantries on the on and off ramps between 213 and Stafford Road. And so each of these kind of has pluses and minuses. Sometimes it's a better situation in the city than the other. We're currently working through kind of what those look like. We've created a agency, what are we calling it? Clackamas County Policy Group of elected officials, and then the staff members from each of the cities to provide kind of that technical guidance to the policymakers so that they can kind of decide how we move forward with this. And so really this alternatives analysis work is kind of looking at where are those endpoints, an assessment of diversion onto the surrounding streets, And what I can say with confidence is none of the options create less traffic in Oregon City. There are substantial impacts to not only the downtown roadways, but also to the Arch Bridge. And so, kind of working through at the political level, how do we address that?
A question, is anybody from West Linn on that? Because it strikes me that they'd be impacted as much or worse than we would.
Yes, so it's Oregon City, West Linn, Gladstone, Canby, Tualatin. I think that's the group. So the other thing that you look at is existing transit during the peak periods to accommodate what they're hoping would be a pretty good mode shift in how you travel. So people who are currently driving a single occupancy vehicle along this congested corridor ideally would choose to use transit. So then we kind of go back to those transit discussions we just had in getting the right services so that people have an appropriate and reliable service that's faster than they could drive it, right? So a transit service wouldn't pay the toll, so you'd be, that balance in time and money savings. And then really kind of looking at, that reliability of service, and then with all things looking at equity and mobility strategies so that all demographics receive travel benefits. We don't want to create a system that only those that can afford to pay a toll are seeing a benefit. Everybody should be seeing that benefit. So,
I have a quick question.
Yes.
With regards to, you were talking about different stations so you avoid people trying to circumvent the tolls. I mean, here in Oregon City, we see how many people coming down 213 that, I mean, majority of them aren't even Oregon City residents. So is it going to be able to address that? Because I only see that getting worse, given what you're saying.
So that's one of the things we've been looking at a little bit. The modeling results are not showing huge traffic volume increases on Highway 213. It's really showing those volume increases on 99, traveling down through Canby.
Which is already a popular route.
Yeah, so those are, I think we've had the modeling data for a week and a half or so. And it's kind of an ongoing, kind of looking in the models. There's definitely times of day where we see more impact than other times of day. At this point, ODOT hasn't made any determinations on hours of tolling, but preliminary numbers say the only time you wouldn't be tolled is from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. So even, crossing the Arch Bridge, to get to dinner, either from Oregon City to West Linn or West Linn to Oregon City, you're going to see diversion at the dinner time hour, not just the PM peak hour.
Dana, John, have you looked at the model for a van pool with subscribers? For example, my youngest daughter lives here in Portland and commuted down to Salem and was very satisfied with the van pool that existed, and it was subscriber to that. She's since moved to Portland, so she doesn't take it any longer, but a number of major metropolitan areas use van pools, and it's a subscriber, and so it's primarily taking 4 or 5 riders off the road and replace it with one van pool going usually to and from work.
I haven't heard anyone use that term. I wrote it down, and I will definitely bring that up.
Yeah, when I was working with state parks in Salem, van pooling was a big thing, and there was about 10 or 15 of them that I know of that were commuting between various points in Portland and Vancouver to Salem and Eugene and Albany and Corvallis.
Dana, I can actually send you more detail about Vanpool in this area because I've been working with the city of Wilsonville. The Spark has a ODOT grant, I think last year or the year before, that they received where they give a discount on Vanpool. So they actually reached out to me because we have Wilsonville campus, and I've been trying to organize Vanpools between Oregon City and Wilsonville. So I can send you details about that.
Okay, that would be great. I know, not to talk about transit, but they're all intermingled. I know Wilsonville has been doing some test runs of transit service on the 205 corridor. And I assume that's so they get a better understanding of how reliable the service could be. But I think also ODOT has become much more open to bus on shoulder. And so there's a pretty big effort to kind of look at what that looks like. And I would expect that the transit and multimodal working group, you know, would likely make a recommendation that tolling isn't gonna be equitable without some kind of a transit service. All right, so I tried a screenshot of the ODOT timeline that was in their brochure. So they're really working through on this. It's called a review, but it's really their NEPA, their National Environmental Protection. I'm not sure what the A stands for. It's a federal process they have to go through. And so that's really kind of what's guiding their alternatives analysis as they look at those kind of checklist of things that they would have to implement. For tolling, all the modeling is looking at a year of 2027. So I suspect that's kind of when they think they could implement a toll system. Right now, the 205 tolling work is moving forward ahead of the I-5 tolling. The I-5 project has more work that needs to be done. And the policy group is, you know, questioning that a little bit because the modeling they're showing us is based on only tolling 205. And so when you look at what that does to traffic, it really pushes a lot of the 205 traffic onto I-5. But when you implement an I-5 tolling program, what does that do? It probably is going to go back and rebalance your traffic system if neither of your choices are without a toll. So in the beginning, they might reroute and we might see that congestion relief on 205. But when they start to implement tolling on I-5, does that just push back all the traffic you showed moving, and now we're just as congested, yet we're paying a toll? So these are all questions that we don't have answers to yet. We're sharing all of these with ODOT and hoping they can provide answers on a lot of these. Any other questions on tolling?
There's lots of questions on tolling. There just isn't any answers.
Yeah. So ODOT is doing a presentation on August 5th to the City Commission. We can get you guys the link to the Zoom so you can participate in that if you'd like. I don't claim to be a tolling expert, so it's definitely best to kind of get answers from ODOT. I suspect if you submit a question through their webpage, you would get a pretty quick response. Their team is actually bigger than Oregon City's engineering team total just for tolling. So they've got PI, I think they have 2 or 3 PI people just for tolling. So I suspect you'd get an answer back might not be exactly the one you're wanting, but you probably get an answer back. All right, next topic is at the last TAC meeting, you guys had asked for some information on COVID-19 transportation impacts. I'm going to present some information on volumes and speeds, and then you'll get a short break from me while Ryan from our finance department talks about revenue impacts. And then I'll kind of wrap up that with some information about our 2020 traffic counts program. So hopefully this slide comes through okay. So what this is, ODOT has automatic traffic recorders on 38 locations throughout the state. So those traffic recorders, they pull volumes and speeds on corridors, and they've got logs and logs and logs of volumes and speeds on the freeways. And so what they did, starting with the week of March 16th, so that was the week that generally the schools all closed, they started pulling together a regular report on traffic volumes. And so what this graphic shows is in the light blue is the volumes from 2020, and then they've shown those in comparison to the volumes from 2019. And so that first week of March, you can see volumes were down quite a bit. But then that second week of March, on March 23rd, when the governor issued the stay home order, the traffic volumes were down that week 43% during the weekday and 61% during the weekend. And so you can kind of see those numbers here. And then slowly you can see they've started to kind of creep back up. And this image goes through July 12th. So a couple of things that they shared. So this is weekday. I did pull the weekend as well. So we did see much more dramatic decreases in those weekend trips. People were making choices to stay home with their free time, where maybe during the week they needed to commute for work. So these numbers were much more that 61% the week of the stay home order. And then they've also kind of slowly gone up and are kind of a little more balanced out. So a couple of things, as we see volumes decrease, congestion decreases as well, and our average speeds go up, as does the reliability. So you can make that trip in the time it would take without traffic. So then kind of this slide, which I apologize, it's a little tough to read, but this is out of their report as well. So this has each week down the side, and then the main roadways in the Portland metro area. So what this is showing is the afternoon peak period from 4 to 6, the average speed on each of those roadways. So at the beginning of March, for 205, northbound was 37 miles an hour and southbound was 45. You jump to the first week of the stay home and speeds were averaging 64 miles per hour, and held pretty steady at those kind of mid 60 ranges, and kind of slowly are creeping back up a little bit. You can see the 205 southbound really has not slowed down, and I don't know kind of specifics around that, but the northbound has definitely been a little bit slower. So we've seen it kind of at the state level. We don't have any kind of traffic recording devices like this in Oregon City, but I think what I can kind of generally say based on the phone calls and emails that I've gotten over the months is, we are seeing, less cars on the road. They're generally traveling at a slightly faster speed. And we can kind of generalize those things. And, you know, I think we're seeing the volumes come up, but not quite as much. We've still got people working from home. There's a lot of discussions in the transportation community about, you know, do we think we will go back to, you know, that first week of March volumes? And when do we think we would get there? Is this current pandemic creating, you know, an economic recession that will take a while to recover from? And those are a lot of things that we just don't have answers to. But we do have a lot of technical data that can provide us comparisons, either, you know, volumes year over year or what we're seeing for speeds. So this next slide is something I pulled from TriMet. So this is weekly boardings for bus and max. And so you can see these lines with the solid dots are the 2018-19 numbers. And then the darker lines are those numbers from this year. And so you can see just how dramatic the impact's been to transit use. I don't have specific numbers from the Port of Portland, but a colleague has shared that, you know, at one point they were down, I think 96% of their travel volumes through the airport. You know, different agencies are seeing different impacts. I had another colleague at the city of Portland say that they are currently projecting $7 million in revenue shortfall due to gas tax and parking loss. You know, so that kind of leads us into having Ryan take over and share a little bit of what we're seeing here in Oregon City.
Thank you, Dana. And Dana, if you want, I guess you can keep control, and I'll just say next slide if you want to. I just have a few slides to go through. So, all right, good evening, committee members. Like Dana said, my name is Ryan Bradyhoff. I'm in the finance department here at the city. And in this portion of the presentation, I want to share the revenue impacts, at least thus far, of the COVID-19 pandemic, and specifically the impacts to the transportation funding. So next slide. So of course, what are those funding sources? You probably know this pretty well, but I'll go through them briefly. Really three primary sources. Of course, there's the state highway fund, which we usually refer to as gas tax, but of course it's a little more than just the gas tax. There's the pavement maintenance utility fee, which is that monthly charge that shows up on the utility bill. And then there's of course SDCs, so transportation system development charges, those charges that are assessed at the time a building permit is issued for new construction. So those are kind of the three primary ones, but of course there is one new funding source for the transportation system, and that is the Clackamas County Vehicle Registration Fee. So we did just begin collecting that really just a few months ago. March was the first distribution from the county, and in fiscal year 2020, which just ended June 30, we received about $160,000 from that. And that's going to be phased in over the next couple of years. And once it's fully phased in, we're expecting about $600,000 a year. So you can kind of count that as a new funding source for the transportation system here in the city. And then of course there's other sources. Another big one is grants. And you know, from year to year, we may have awarded more grants or less grants. This year, there are a couple big grants, or I should say this biennium, the two-year budget that we're in now. And so, of course, there's a large grant for the Malala Avenue project and another large grant for the Myers Road extension. So those are kind of the main funding sources. So if we go to the next slide, and actually, you know, so in terms of the COVID impact, if you think about it, it really is the state highway fund that we've seen most of the adverse impact. If you think about the pavement maintenance utility fee, we really haven't seen any adverse impact in that revenue source, in part because that's just a fixed fee. And so it really hasn't been impacted. And the SDCs, you know, those do fluctuate quite a bit from year to year because of changes in development. We actually, again, we haven't seen really any adverse impacts there just yet, in part because we did have some larger projects, construction projects in 2020. And so actually in 2020 for system development charges for the transportation system, we actually have received more revenue than we were even budgeting. So most really the impact is to the state highway fund. So that's what I'm going to talk about here for the rest of my portion of the presentation. Okay, so the state highway fund, of course, like I said, we usually refer to it as the gas tax, but it's really made up of 3 different components, as you may know. There's the motor vehicle fuels tax, which is basically the gas tax, right? The tax on gasoline and diesel. And that makes up almost 50% of the state highway fund distribution that we receive. There's also the motor carrier transportation fees. And so that's, you know, like trucking activity, the weight mile tax, that's about 30%. And then there's the DMV license and registration and operator fees. That's about 20%. The road use assessment fee, that's like less than 1%. So it's really those 3 components. So when we talk about COVID-19 impacts, you know, we're mainly talking about the motor vehicle fuels tax. The motor carrier transportation fees actually have seen no impact. And that's because trucking activity really hasn't been impacted. You know, they're still making deliveries to grocery stores. They're still, you know, a lot of people are buying things online and trucks are delivering those items. As for the DMV stuff, I mean, what we see there is, you know, there were temporary closures of DMV offices. So we definitely are, you know, expected to see an impact there. But a lot of that resulted in, you know, a pent up demand for transactions that will come back as those offices reopen. So if anything, that revenue is probably delayed. It's really the fuel tax where those trips that, you know, started to decrease, like Dana showed in March and April. I mean, those trips are gone and those aren't coming back. And so that's revenue that is gone and is not coming back. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at kind of first here on a graph of what that looks like. So again, this is still the state highway fund distribution. So this is the amount that comes to the city from the state for those items we just talked about on the previous slide. And so this is comparing the most recent 12 months for the current year and then the prior year. Notice that in March, so looking at the green line for the current year, notice in March, we go to April and we see a slight increase. And then we go to May and we see another increase. And you're thinking, well, but the stay-at-home order was in March and all these people stopped driving in April. Why is it increasing? Well, the reason is because there's a delay. There's a delay from when the state assesses all of those taxes and then when they collect them and then ultimately remit them to us. So there is about a 2-month delay. And so sure enough, the first month where we really felt the impact was the June distribution and then again in July. So it slightly went up in July, but you can compare it to that gray line, which is the same months last year, and you can see how much it is depressed. So then if we go to the next slide, we can actually see how that relates to dollars specifically. So again, in the fiscal year 2020, which just ended a few weeks ago, June 30. So last year we were budgeting 2.6 million in that bucket of state revenue, highway fund distribution, which includes gas tax and those other items. So we budgeted 2.6 million and now we've ended the year with 2.41 million. So for a difference of $190,000. So that's the impact in the most recent fiscal year. As for next year, fiscal year 2021, which we just now are in, we were budgeting 2.79 million, and we're pretty sure we're not going to get that. We're probably going to get more like 2.59 million, which is a decrease of about $200,000. So I've got the next couple years here forecasted, 2.74 million in the next year, and then 2.85. So really, I mean, we expect that the bulk of that impact was in fiscal year 2020, even though that, you know, there were only 2 months, June and July, where we see those, hopefully the most severe impacts. and that fiscal year 2021 is going to continue to recover, and 2022 is going to be a recovery year. And really, it probably won't be until fiscal year 2025, I'm thinking, where we might see full recovery. You can notice even in next year, 2022, we're thinking 2.74 million. That's still less than what we thought we were going to get this year, the 2.79 million. So these budget numbers were developed, over a year and a half ago, and were based on the state's, forecast at that time, which were obviously way before the pandemic. So it's definitely had an impact. And moving forward, we'll budget more, with this in mind. If we go to the next slide, I mean, in closing, like I say, our revenue sources fairly diverse. Like I say, we've got the PMUF, we've got SDCs, now we've got the Clackamas County registration fees. And like I say, the bulk of the impact so far has been to the State Highway Fund distribution. We do expect that to start to recover though. But so overall, I feel good about our situation. But of course, the future is uncertain. And there's a lot we don't know. And, it's really all dependent on, how the health crisis plays out. So a lot could happen. So we're monitoring things financially, but that's basically where we stand. Any questions?
I'm curious.
Thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
All right, thank you for your time.
I'm curious what project specifically this could be impacted. Like, have you figured out that $200,000 where that impacts actual projects that will not be able to be done because of that decrease in revenue?
So we haven't done a ton. We are scheduled on August 5th to have a discussion with the City Commission on transportation project prioritization. And that isn't the primary discussion point at that, really kind of some discussion around prioritization of pedestrian improvements along Holcomb Boulevard. But a little bit of that is, we've held on a few projects. As soon as we saw traffic volumes going down, we've kind of held back on projects we haven't started until we understood what those financial impacts would be. Engineering staff and Ryan meet quarterly, even pre-pandemic, to look at revenues, project expenses, what projects are underway, which ones do we start. So, we do a pretty good job of keeping an eye on that stuff. I don't know that I can say we've identified a specific project or projects that will take these impacts. It's more of we've delayed a few projects until we understood the budget impacts.
That makes sense.
So specifically, a project that we wanted to get under construction this year was some sidewalk infill on Gaffney Lane, and we've held on that. We haven't gone out to bid until we understood what these impacts were. So I guess what I can say is we do anticipate these lost revenue to come out of capital project funding, not out of staff. But the specific project, I don't think I'd say we're canceling any projects. It's just the ability to implement them will be delayed.
Okay.
And the one thing I guess I could also note is that we actually didn't budget for the Clackamas County revenue because at the time it wasn't a sure thing. Since we were on a 2-year budget, it was so long ago that we were budgeting. We actually didn't put that in because we weren't positive if that was going to pass. And so in a way, certainly that $160,000 that we received certainly helps and offsets that decrease from the State Highway Fund.
So kind of that we're short 190 in gas tax, we got 160 extra. Those all really go into the same kind of fund. So in theory, we're only short 30, and contingency could kind of cover that kind of number fairly easily. We just have been hesitant to start a couple of the projects that are queued up, not knowing how big these impacts would be. Because we didn't get that payment until late June to know what that first one looks like would be less. You know, and then whose crystal ball are we using to project when will volumes be back up? You know, so what are those impacts long term? So I feel like we're doing a good job keeping an eye on it. As much as we want to get projects out the door and keep the economy going by building construction projects, we're also being careful not to overextend ourselves when we don't know those changes to our revenues.
Makes sense.
We're only spending money that's already in the account, not the money we think is going to show up in the next few months.
Are there any maintenance savings that we can identify due to the lack of volume?
I know that when we sat in our last transportation meeting, our operations crew identified some cost savings. I don't know if Vance is on here and maybe remembers any of those, but we did kind of look at what kind of stuff have we not done this year that we could hold on.
Okay.
I was wondering regarding the traffic volume data, is there any way to split that by mode? Because, for example, I've seen in Portland that bike mode share has increased because people are not using transit as much. And is there similar statewide trends that is going on, or is it just Portland that's seeing the bike increase?
I don't know. ODOT doesn't have, that I'm aware of, counters for bike and ped. But I do think that just kind of generically, I don't know that you can buy an adult bike at any store in town that would be what a family would consider a reasonable investment in a bike, because they're all sold out.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think we're generally seeing that, but we don't have any specific numbers.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Ryan, for.
All right, thank you.
So I think our last topic under COVID-19 transportation impacts is sort of the staff recommendation on how we move forward with what would have been our 2020 traffic counts update. So historically, we conduct citywide traffic counts every 3 years. These counts occur in the fall after the schools have started and classes are underway at the community college. We have 185 locations throughout the city that are shown as green dots on this map. Each of these count information is available on our GIS mapping app for traffic counts. And so we've got 2011, 2014, and 2017. These are information that staff use regularly to understand how our roads are used, when we can allow a developer to take a lane or to possibly close a road. And then as well, they're often used. So recently we did the Holcomb Boulevard speed analysis. And so we use these volumes and speed counts for that. So they're a great tool, something that is very valuable and beneficial. And we were scheduled in this fall to complete the 2020 traffic counts. At this point, I'm recommending we don't complete the counts this year. So one of the key criteria for the traffic counts is that CCC be underway and open their fall term. So, CCC has already made the decision to go online for fall of 2020. They made the decision quite a while ago, I think, maybe even when the summer was online. Mm-hmm. And so I do think we would see very different numbers for any of those counts in that area. As we kind of discussed, traffic volumes are low right now. And, they're fluctuating at least, they're fluctuating a decent amount even weekly. And so my nervousness with taking citywide traffic counts, it's a pretty big endeavor. I don't specifically remember how much we spend on it, but in a normal year, I feel it's a good investment. It gives us good baseline information, and it's a useful tool. I'm nervous that if we take them during a regularly fluctuating volumes, lack of college traffic volumes in that, that we will have to be very careful how we use those numbers. And so at this point, I'm recommending that we postpone until fall of 2021. Even if we're still in a pandemic situation at that time, I think we will have leveled out and it'll be a little more consistent. You know, I'm nervous about spending money that we're going to have to put a caveat on every page. These were during the pandemic, and the volume the week before and the week after were very different. You know, so this earlier on the meeting, there was a mention of talking to John about some traffic counts before the Myers Road opens. And so he hasn't shared with me that email, but if we wanted to maybe just get a few key areas, that might be something we could do, but I still don't feel that citywide traffic counts would provide the value.
Dana?
Yes.
The idea of doing 5th Street, Linn Avenue, and Myers Road was mine, basically because I'm thinking with the Malawa construction and Myers Road opening up, people are going to start using that at least for a little bit as a detour, and it'd be nice to know how much that traffic is affected. I don't think including it in the citywide issue is a good idea for the same reasons that you have stated. But to answer the question, are people diverting? I think it would be useful data.
Okay, I can talk with John. I know that is something we've talked about. You know, how is traffic patterns going to change in Oregon City with just some of our larger projects, the Walla construction impact, but also the opening of Myers. And I think that between those two projects that are already underway and the upcoming project that will look at all the traffic signals on the Beaver Creek corridor, all the way from Warner Milne to Maple Lane, and provide new signal timing and coordination between those signals. I think in the next 2 years, we're going to see a lot of changes in travel patterns on all three of those major corridors. The Myers Road, you know, from Leland, the Leland-Myers corridor across 213 to the new Myers Road, Malala construction, and then after construction, and then Beaver Creek as we look to implement the dual left turn lanes from Malala to Beaver Creek as well. So I do think we're going to see changes.
Well, my thought is on this one is also that that Myers Road, Linn Avenue, and 5th Street is measurably quicker to get through the main shopping area and post office area, Fred Meyer area, especially if your destination is south of Oregon City on 213 or on Beaver Creek Road. That if you know, it's a bypass route, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Once we posted the lower speed limit on Malala, I think I had a handful of residents reach out about, you know, concerns with speeding on Myers.
Oh yeah, they were. I watched them.
So, you know, one of the things that we can do is work with Vance and Jason. You know, we're getting complaints about speeding in that corridor. It is posted 35 and Malala is now 30. So it may appear more attractive to folks. There are a few stop signs, I think, along that corridor. But that's definitely something we'll look at.
between 213 and downtown, there's 2 stop and go red lights. There's 1 4-way stop and 1 traffic signal, which is a lot less than what's on 7th Street and Malala.
Yeah, so I think we're definitely going to see some pretty big changes in how people use our transportation system. And, you know, my hope is that we can implement this Beaver Creek Road signal project that should make that corridor more reliable for your travel, because those signals would be set up to all work together. We'll be pulling fiber interconnect on those and really trying to provide that as the fastest corridor. So the good news is we have the funding to do that through a grant. The not as great news is the funding for that is not until fiscal year 2022. So Myers will be open, Malala will be probably wrapping up, and we'll have a little lag time, and then we'll be implementing the new signal timing on Beaver Creek. So
sounds like a good way to go, actually.
Yeah, so each of those times we'll be relooking at that key Malala Beaver Creek intersection. I know there's concerns about the switch to the dual left turns, and you know, not to give away my later announcement, but that gets implemented later this week. So, you know, keep your eyes out. You know, we'll be continually looking at and adjusting the timing of that intersection through the construction phase. And then, you know, as we work to fully implement those dual left turn lanes.
Is there any news on the Beaver Creek 213 changes that we were thinking about last year? The extended downhill turn from Beaver Creek inbound to 213 downhill and the single left going the other way?
So we do have some funding in this biennial budget to start looking at that. It is one of those projects that we've held on starting until we understood, you know, these revenue impacts. And I suspect that, not to plug the August 5th work session again, but we'll be talking about transportation prioritization and, you know, how do we as a city prioritize our transportation dollars? Is it focused on vehicle capacity? Is it focused on bike ped improvements? Is it trying to balance each of those items? You know, we made a commitment to ODOT that we would move that work forward to provide that capacity. You know, we've now been asked to fund improvements on Holcomb. So now we have to decide if the project doesn't move forward to provide funding to Holcomb.
Again, I'm glad it's you and John.
Yeah. All right, so this kind of wraps up the traffic counts for 2020.
One question about this. By postponing to next year, would the future ones be like 2023, or you're going to go 2024? You're going to push all the other ones by a year?
You cut out a little bit and I didn't quite hear that.
Is the, by postponing it to next year, is the rest going to be postponed by a year, or is it going to go back to normal 3-year cycle? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you know, we haven't talked about that.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know if we would go back and do 2023 or if we would push it to 2024.
Okay.
We've got a little time. We don't have to budget until the next biennial budget. So I'm trying to think that one through and make a decision. My next topic is the Metro Get Moving update. And so I'm going to share with you some information about this. It's going to be very fact-based. At this point, Metro has referred to the voters a package. So I cannot advocate or talk about the program and those kind of things, except for to state facts. So I'll attempt to answer questions if you have them. They've got a lot of information on their webpage, so I would kind of refer you to that and to their staff. So on July 16th, Metro Council adopted a package to be sent to voters in November of 2020. The package includes $5 billion in transportation improvements that is expected to draw an additional $2.8 billion in federal, state, and local funds. The proposed funding mechanism is an employer-paid tax to exceed 0.75% of wages paid. They did opt to allow themselves to set an initial rate lower than that to reflect economic conditions. And then they did include an opportunity to raise that rate up to the not to exceed rate, not more than once per fiscal year. So if they choose to set the rate lower than that maximum rate, then they can update that once a year based on economic conditions. If the tax is approved, begin in 2022, employers with 25 or fewer total employees, as well as state and local governments, are exempt from paying the tax. On that day, they also adopted an implementation, oversight, and accountability policies and procedures, as well as the region-wide program descriptions and the corridor investment packages. They have shared that they believe the investment package could create 37,500 jobs. So this slide kind of shows you the 10 region-wide program descriptions. For Safe Routes to School, they would identify $4.5 million each year for grant programs for capital projects. These could include sidewalks and crosswalk enhancements, like lighting, pavement markers, and signs to make crossings more visible. For safety hotspots, they've identified $4.5 million in grant funding that would be based on crash data to identify high crash locations. And the funding would be for planning and design, and the agency would need to provide or compete in addition in another funding category for construction funds. So this safety hotspots is I assume will be similar to the All Roads Transportation Safety Program, which is an ODOT program that's based on crash data. And that's the program that's funding our Beaver Creek Road signal upgrades. Their intention is not to recreate the wheel, but to use programs and fund programs that are successful currently. They've also identified Thriving Main Streets program, which would be $2.5 million per year to improve transportation safety, accessibility, and access to transit on a local main street. Anti-displacement strategies, that would be $2.5 million per year for corridor-specific anti-displacement strategies developed with the projects in a corridor. And so those would be the corridors that I'll share with you on the next slide. Housing opportunities, $6.5 million annual investment for a region-wide revolving bridge loan fund or a capital grant program for affordable housing opportunities along their identified investment corridor. Regional walking and biking connections would be a $9 million per year grant program to provide pedestrian and bicycle improvements. These could be bridges over major roadways, waterways, or other barriers, as well as paved trails and bikeways protected from vehicle traffic. I suspect this program would be similar to our regional flexible funds program that the region has now, which is the program that's funding the Malala Avenue Streetscape project. Bus electrification, they're proposing $9 million annually to move forward with getting our bus system off of diesel to improve climate change and improve community health and advance racial equity. The Youth Transit Access Program would be $9 million in additional funding for youth transit access. Better Bus is $2 million a year to address transit improvements such as bus-only lanes, bus priority signals, curb extensions at bus stops, or making it easier to board buses quickly. And then future corridor planning is $500,000 for each year for future corridor planning for transit or other transportation improvements. So that totals $50 million a year in programs. The corridor investment package identified is shown here kind of on this visual. The circles are really kind of like your planning areas. So Central City is your downtown. Our regional centers are kind of distributed around the region, and Oregon City is a regional center. And then there are town centers, and then the kind of cyan color is the employment areas. So the investment corridors are these kind of yellowish lines. So McLaughlin Boulevard is one, as is Highway 43, Sunrise and Highway 212, and maybe 17. I didn't make in my notes how many there are. So these are the corridors. I didn't pull specific details of what would be included in the McLaughlin project, but prior to referring it to the ballot, I worked closely with Metro to identify items that I believe would be a benefit to Oregon City to have included in the package. Do you have any questions?
I got questions, but I don't think you'd be allowed to answer them.
Okay.
I have a clarifying comment about the youth fair. I just want to clarify that I believe it starts out with high school students and then it expands to middle school and then elementary school. I just want to clarify that point. I believe that's one thing they're trying to focus on with that.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, that's not one of the ones that I was following much, but I know that they've done a lot of outreach and they had a lot of public comment related to the youth transit access. All right, so I'm getting super close to Public Works report. This should be quick, hopefully. So I wanted to just give you a little update on a couple of things. Parklets. On July 15th, the City Commission approved a parklet pilot program. I don't have any visuals of this, but the concept, and I don't know if John's talked with you guys much about this or not, but the idea is in order to address social distancing and still provide restaurants the ability to kind of make ends meet during these times with limited indoor seating. In the downtown mixed use district and along the 7th Street corridor from Singer Hill to Jackson, businesses are allowed to apply for a parklet, which allows them to temporarily convert on-street parking into restaurant seating. So this is a program that I think Milwaukee has been using for a few years, as well as a few other cities. They would be allowed to use that parking space through November 30th of this year. And then the City Commission will kind of review kind of what they learned from this kind of first round of the program, but it does identify an opportunity to bring the program back in 2021, beginning on March 15th and running again through November 30th. Laura Turway presented at the July 15th City Commission meeting, and she had a lot of graphics of what these could look like. So the parklet program is in the right-of-way. There's also an opportunity to convert private parking lots to restaurant seating as well. And so it's kind of it's a two-piece program. Any questions?
For me, I'm just curious why the March 15th through November 30th, why isn't it year round? Is it because of the rainy season? Yes.
I'm not sure on that. I would suspect it is. I know that in the converting a parking lot to dining use, they can have an overhead cover. And there was concerns about those in the wind. So maybe, I think that one of the visuals and the concept was sort of the canopy that OC Brewing sometimes puts up that I think we generally don't like, those canvas covers. They are willing to allow that for this situation.
Okay.
This was some work that the Downtown Oregon City Association, DOCA, was very interested in and feels will help the economy in downtown Oregon City. Next update, Myers Road extension. So I don't know if you guys have kind of driven along Highway 213 or Ray, don't listen. Sometimes I drive through the college parking lot because you get a really great view of Myers Road from up there, kind of by their transit center. So they've been making great progress. The curb and sidewalk on the new Myers Road is quickly wrapping up. The underground utilities have been installed. The contractor is working on the new traffic signal at Highway 213. They've been working through the grading work on the college side to add that additional northbound through lane. And then I think they've taken out the median that kind of blocked that future southbound left turn lane, but I don't think they've quite gotten the paving fixed out there yet. They're working on the stormwater roadside rain garden on Myers Road. And the most exciting news is that Bonneville Power Administration, although it was touch and go, they got put on no work when the federal government shut down. And then we had to basically beg and plead to be allowed for them to do that work in July. But our begging and pleading worked, and the tower is relocated and raised. So that was our critical schedule piece. So kind of what we're sharing publicly is we are confident the road will be open in spring of 2021. The contractor has a schedule that they think is attainable that would open the road late October if we can get a paving window. So publicly, we're committing to spring of 2021. The contractor is working hard to get it open by late fall.
This fall?
Yes.
Wow.
It's dependent if they can get the rain gardens planted and the road paved before we get wet weather. So if we have a dry fall, we should be looking good.
From what I've seen of it, it looks like they're getting really close to making things black.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah.
So kind of what I've got to show you now is some photos, and the photos are a little bit old. They are from April, but we haven't had a chance to share with you guys since then. So it's definitely even further along than this, but I pulled a couple of photos to share. So these are from a drone that the consultant has. And so this is 213 southbound here. This is the existing piece of Myers. And so you can really see, even back in April, we had a lot of these sidewalks, this new connection kind of up into the campus for pedestrians. You can really kind of see that the trees have been removed. It's tough from this angle, but these are pretty steep slopes. We have quite a bit of cut into that hillside. And so when you drive along the new Myers, it's gonna feel like you're in a little bit of a valley. So again, these are from April, so they're a little old. We've gotten quite a bit of work going on out on the shoulder for the widening now, but haven't been able to get new drone photos. So the next one is, so here's the BPA lines, here's the college parking lot. So 213 is running here. So you can kind of really see it come through here and cut through. In this one, you can kind of see that sidewalk down there, and they hadn't gotten sidewalk down through all this part. At this point, all the sidewalk was in except for under the BPA lines. We weren't allowed to put any hard surfaces until those lines were raised. This pile here is of the large boulders that they've removed during the construction work. If anyone needs some landscape boulders, my guess is you can they're trying to give them away. The next photo is that's that pile of boulders. This is their work yard. So kind of at the bottom of the screen would be towards the transportation maintenance facility. And then at the top of the screen would be towards 213. So they were doing some dirt stockpiling, and they'd negotiated with the private property owners to have some storage on those facilities. And then this is kind of their staging yard and their work yard. Here is the view. Oh, I gave you the same picture twice. Sorry about that. One more. So again, this is that pile of rocks, and this is their storage yard. So this is the transportation maintenance facility. So they've made great progress. It's been a really fun and exciting project, and I'm excited for it to open. In the event it opens this fall, unless things change and the limitations on public gatherings are adjusted, we unfortunately won't be able to hold a formal ribbon cutting and public event. So we're kind of working through what that might look like virtually. So something new every day to take on and learn about.
If you could get a hold of the Google street mapping car and just drive it down through there before it opens.
Yeah.
And post that online.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to try it here, but if you go to the Myers Road page, our consultant did put together a little video about the project that I think we've shared on social media and is available on the project page. I just wasn't confident my my computer would run a video, but it's a pretty short little video, and it's pretty exciting.
How about getting a drone and just flying it over it when it's done and using that for the ribbon cutting?
Yeah, so I think we're gonna see if we can get some pre-recorded statements from some of the key stakeholders and kind of string together some video and some photos. And then right now we're limited to 25 people, so we may do an actual ribbon cutting, but with 25 people, that doesn't go very far. So we'll see. We've got the big scissors, we're ready to use them. We just are limited on how many people.
Regarding the difference between this fall and next spring or fall when it opens and TriMet reroute service, is there a discussion about rerouting it possibly this fall or maybe next year? Like, how does that coordinate with this schedule you're talking about?
Yeah, so before we knew if BPA was going to get the tower raised this year or not, TriMet was only willing to commit to fall of 2021 for changes to service to the high school along this new Myers Road. I have reached out to them and shared that at this point we are confident we would be ready for that transit service in spring of 2021. And so I suspect as they're going through their kind of service planning, that they might even be reevaluating some of the changes they were proposing as they adjust their budgets.
Yeah.
So I have shared with them that we would be ready for spring of 2021, because when they asked me 6 months ago, I couldn't be confident we would have the road opened. If BPA didn't make this summer, then they would have happened next summer, and our whole project would have gotten pushed a year.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on Myers Road?
Dana, this doesn't relate to the road itself, but the idea for economic development for a business park or something that, do you know if anybody's been looking into the private development now that this road's opening up the area?
Thank you for reminding me. I missed my own speaker note. So we are super excited, but I don't think it's quite ready for so at this point, the property here where the rocks are at and where the contractor is staging has come in for a pre-application for a financial institution headquarters, and they are moving forward through the land use process. So there's a good chance we will quickly have a tenant along the roadway, which is exactly what the purpose of this road was, for that Beaver Creek employment area. And then also kind of just solidifies the Business Oregon Immediate Opportunity Fund grant that we got from Myers Road, which is to revitalize and bring jobs to an area. So our fingers are crossed. They're moving through the land use process. You know, they're regularly reaching out to ask when the road will be ready and open so that it can be coordinated with their timing. As with any private development, you know, they could choose at any time to not move forward. But it is very exciting. Almost as exciting as the road opening.
Do you have any timeline to pavement on that road?
So the paving on 213 will be ready and should happen this summer, pretty clearly in a summer paving window. The paving on Myers is that question of, can they make the fall or will it be spring? If we have that dry fall, we usually get good paving in early October that we can take advantage of. If we have a wet fall and we don't get that good dry weather, then we can't move forward with paving the roadway, which would then likely delay us all the way into spring, when we can kind of get that sometimes we get a February paving window where the temperatures are warm enough and dry enough. And so if we miss fall, you know, the contractor is going to be just as excited to pave this and get his final payment and retainage that we've been holding for months. So yeah, it's all kind of a wait and see. How quickly can they get things moving? I think they're anticipating the new signal to be turned on in August. It would not include the fourth leg, so it would just be utilizing that new equipment instead of the old equipment.
I think they're on now.
Oh.
I think it's still the old one. I think the new one, the new mast arms are up, but the heads are bagged.
Oh, okay.
I'm still waiting for ODOT to approve everything. Test it.
Regarding the payment part, does the new access road to the community college, is that included in the payment schedule you're referring to, or is that separate from that? New south entrance?
even if it got paved ahead of time, we'd still keep that closed at Douglas Loop. They might be able to pave that one ahead of time, but even if it was paved, it would still stay closed.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everything got paved to everything next to the college.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
Hopefully the base course will get down this fall, and that would be that would facilitate getting it finished early.
Yes. Okay. I'm super close to being done. Malala Avenue Streetscape Project. So I think I kind of spilled the beans a little bit earlier. We have issued the notice to proceed to the contractor. We've still got PGE working out in the corridor, as well as I think 6 or 8 communication companies that are moving the lines from the old poles to the new poles. But as of still this afternoon, the evening of Thursday, July 23rd, we implement our first big change out there, which is converting one of those through lanes to dual left turn lanes. And so, you know, this does a couple of things. It helps allow vehicles to choose a different route than Malala during construction if they don't need services along the corridor. But it also helps us address some of the operational issues and capacity issues at the intersection long term. So I'm going to try and explain this, but it's going to be one of those where you just have to use caution and test it out. So we'll implement the dual lefts onto Beaver Creek. The through lane will continue along the existing curb next to the Marquee development. And while that's happening, the northbound lanes, which don't show on this, will actually be squished to 1 lane northbound. And so one of the northbound lanes, the northbound left turn lane, and that southbound inner lane will become the work zone for that water line work that needs to happen at this north end. So it's not an ideal situation for the contractor to be working with traffic on either side of them. But this option provides the best ability to get around for the traveling public. So there'll be short impacts to traffic as the contractor brings in more materials into his center work zone. But the other option was not a good one. So we eliminated that one. This also allows a lot of this waterline work to happen during the day and not at night. So we'll have less impacts to the residents between Beaver Creek and Claremont for noise, which was a key component of the City Commission. They were concerned about night work and impacts to residents. So that'll get the waterline work moving. They'll start at Beaver Creek and they'll run that waterline all the way to 213. I suspect they'll start doing some of the ADA ramps as well once they kind of get geared up and fully going. We will see in the next month or so the turn off of the Claremont signal. So as they work their way south down the corridor, once we turn that signal off, we will leave it off for the remainder of the project. And then as they get closer to Gaffney, that one will come off as well. And both of them will be 4-way stops. It's going to help make a safer corridor for the contractor. And it's also going to be a safer situation for pedestrians out there. If we're moving lanes and pedestrians are trying to cross Malala with the way our signals are currently ran, it becomes an even larger safety concern than it is today without construction. So that's a change. If you're like me, you drive through it Friday morning just to see what it looks like. Make sure it's working, or maybe you'll choose not to. Maybe as geeky as me. So that's the Malala update. Is there any questions? Okay. Just a short, quick update. These are some TriMet bus route changes that TriMet has reached out to the city about. These are changes they would like to propose to the line 3. So currently in one direction, when it's heading to the transit center from the college, it uses Railroad Avenue, and they would like to move that onto Main Street. So both directions have the bus on Main Street. It impacts one bus stop, and it provides a better ADA accessible bus stop for the users.
I have a question on that one.
Yes.
Can the bus make that turn from
99 north.
from 99 onto Main Street without using up all the lanes on both the highway and the street?
Tough.
Yeah, I mean, they feel like
they need a
yeah.
52-foot curt radius on their travel. The last I knew, and it's tough to get some cars around that corner.
They say they've tested these, and they say these are both options that they think would benefit their riders and their reliability.
Well, I can agree with that. I just don't think the bus is going to get around there very easily.
Yeah, I think that one we have a little bit of concern with. I would say the line 99 reroute is one we have quite a bit more concern with, because they would like to use Singer Hill Road instead of Washington Street. So
again, that corner down onto the railroad tracks there by the Dutch brothers is
yes, and
be interesting.
So the 99E changes, we've got a meeting scheduled with TriMet next week to go over. They feel like it will shorten their route. I questioned what happens when they get stuck behind the slow freight train.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So apparently they used to run on Singer Hill Road previously and moved off of it. And so I've asked them to figure out why they moved off of it to start with. So the change they're proposing to make does not impact any stops, because there's no stop in Washington that the bus serves. And so, we'll talk with them about that change. I'm just really concerned that although they might see a decrease in travel time, they will become much less reliable, because when they get stopped by a train, an Amtrak train's not too bad. If you get stopped, by a slow freight train, I think I looked it up, and there are 18 trains a day that use that crossing on average. I know oftentimes when I leave work, I don't go down that hill because there's a train almost every day at 5 o'clock. So I go down 12th and go under the train. So we're going to continue to work with them. But I think the good news is they are kind of trying to seek out these little efficiencies in their system, and kind of address these things. So they are, continually looking at how to make transit in Oregon City better. And so I think that's maybe a part of what I wanted to just share here, is that, they're trying, they're working on, and staff will continue to work with them to get the best transit service we can.
Good, thank you.
And my last slide is just a short update. So at the last meeting, we talked about Holcomb Boulevard Safe to School grant. We shared that information with the City Commission on June 15th, and we heard some feedback from the City Commission on things they might like to see addressed in the project. And so we're currently have the TAC feedback and the City Commission feedback, and we're looking at, some of those things and seeing what we can address in the project. So at this point, we probably won't bring back the grant again in August unless that's a request of the TAC. So our application is due August 31st, and we should hear back by the end of December. the question that we were asked by the City Commission in related to the request by the Holcomb neighborhood is, what is our plan B if we don't get the grant? And so, you know, as I mentioned, we'll be having a little bit of that discussion on August 5th. You know, I have continually told the neighborhood that our best option is the grant program. You know, it's a $1.6 million project for the 4 crossings and the sidewalk infill. Removing the sidewalk infill removes a good portion of the cost of the project, but 2 of those 4 crosswalks and RFB locations are within a mapped wetland, which means I've got to go through a full natural resource assessment and a land use process to determine if it is a wetland or if it's not a wetland. Those same 2 that are located in a natural resource overlay district are also the 2 that require right-of-way acquisition in order to implement. And so my commitment to the neighborhood has always been, if we don't get the grant, which is our best option, that leverages our city funds, you know, quadruple what we could deliver with that dollar amount, that we will identify a plan B project. And so some of what we'll talk about in August at that work session is prioritization. You know, we've been asked to work on the pedestrian crossings, the Trillium Park Drive neighborhood, which I think you got an update last month, is also asking when Trillium Park Drive is going to be reopened after it slid and it's been closed for 3 or more years now. And so we've kind of got a long list of things that we've been asked to prioritize, and we do not have enough funding to do them all. And so a little bit of discussion about, you know, how do we move forward and provide the wants and desires of the Holcomb neighborhood, and maybe that's a smaller project that we can implement, you know, quicker, and look for other grant opportunities. So that's a little bit of discussion for August.
Can you face any of that?
I think we can. I think we can implement 2 of the RRFBs fairly easily. The 2 on the west side of the school. There's no right-of-way needed and no natural resources. So that's purely a design and construction project. The sidewalk infill and the 2 on the east side of the school, so near Oak Tree Terrace and Winston, those both require right-of-way acquisition, which can add a considerable amount of time if you don't have willing participants. And then natural resource, which would need to go through the full land use process, and I suspect would take 6+ months to go through that process. So I do think we could create a phase 1 that would be relatively quick and easy to deliver. It's still going to take time to design and bid and construct a project.
It sounds like you could also have the option then of splitting it between biennium budgets too.
Yes, and so kind of going back where Ryan was talking about those vehicle registration fees, you know, those are kind of a funding source that, you know, John and I have kind of thought makes sense for some of those small infill projects. So as Ryan mentioned, I think we anticipate when it's fully implemented and collected that we would get about $600,000 a year. So that doesn't build a lot, but it's definitely more than 0. You know, we could make some progress on some of these smaller projects each year. You know, the Gaffney Lane sidewalk project, I think it's about $400,000 for that sidewalk infill. To do those 2 RRFBs on the west side, I would guess we could get done close to $200,000. So we could tick off some small projects that were more community type project with that funding. Or the city council may say they want to it and build larger projects like a quiet zone, or, you know, widening Beaver Creek Road to supplement the Beaver Creek Road or Thimble Creek concept plan. Or fix Trillium Drive. We have a long list.
Yeah, it never ends.
Nope.
You'd work one out and 3 more show up.
So we are working on exactly what a plan B would look like and how we would fund it and timing of it. But I don't have specific scope, schedule, budget at this point. So that's my last item.
Thanks, Dana.
Thank you.
Hey, gentlemen, I think everybody really needs to thank Dana, please. Pretty outstanding job pulling all of this information together. I have no idea how long you spent on it, but Dana, thank you very much. Really, really great work, and it's very much appreciated. I think Ryan stepped out. I'll make sure I call Ryan Bradyhoff tomorrow, thank him for his efforts. But really good, Dana. Thank you, sincerely. I just have one quick thing, just FYI, the slurry seal contractor is in town. They started today. They had a very good first day. They have 3 more days of slurry sealing yet to do. So we are looking really good with weather. So barring any equipment breakdowns on their end, Jason and I feel very confident that they'll be able to complete all the roads that they have listed out. If you haven't already and you'd like to see those roads, just get on the Oregon City website, search slurry seal, and it'll get you the maps and the roads that we're doing this year. And that's all I have. Not that I had much tonight. Again, Dana, thank you. And thanks to the board members. Does anybody have anything for me that they'd like to ask or have me follow up on?
I have a quick question. This is for Kim, probably more than you.
You bet.
For the August 5th meeting, you'll provide us, Kim, with a access to the Zoom program so I can listen in on the discussion?
You mean like give you the link like I did this time?
Yeah, visible, not participating, but just visible.
For other people to participate in the meeting, is that what you're asking?
I was just talking for myself, for our committee here.
Yeah, I'll definitely send the Zoom meeting invite.
Okay. I had to flag mine so it wouldn't get lost.
You can, when I send them out, you can add it to your calendar and then you can just go to the day. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's what I do. And then you just click on the link in your calendar.
Yeah.
But the link is always, well, you can always email me for it if you need it, or it should always be, well, I take it back. I was going to say it's on the city website, but it's not. So I can always give it to you.
All right, Henry, it's all yours.
Okay. Any objections to calling this meeting a done deed and getting rid of it? All righty.
Good.
It's adjourned.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone.
Thank you. Well done. Well done. You did.
Thanks again, Dana. You were awesome.
Sorry, I tried to keep it quick, but man, we just have so much stuff piled up.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It was good.
So I feel like I'm going to reach out to the county to see if they can